Hey everyone, good evening. After Lance Wright with Life Over Addiction, and I'm glad for you to join me tonight. I want to talk about trauma and healing. I'm going to give a few moments, just kind of breeze around things because I want to give opportunity for people to join in on this and maybe ask questions. Let me fix a few more things, whatever that is. Okay. Oh, it keeps wanting me to do stuff, so hold on a second. All right, we'll just roll with it. All right. And hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm going to turn this up again. Okay. There we go. Everyone, so tonight I want to talk about trauma. Let's start out with trauma. What is trauma? Trauma is something that's been, let me straighten this out. Trauma is something that's been inflicted on us or is a byproduct of an action we may, of our own volition, have created. A lot of people don't really think about it, don't want to think about it. I work in addiction treatment, and as an addiction professional, I see people that live with trauma every day. And oftentimes they don't live with it well. Oftentimes it's disguised, it's masked, it's suppressed, it's drugged, it's medicated, it's avoided at all cost. And yet the trauma exists and the pain exists. The wound doesn't go away. I can't really see anything because I'm just really going to be spitting this out tonight so you guys can get an idea of who I am and how I operate. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving any advice. I'm just sharing experiences working in the treatment field and working with many people throughout the years as an addiction professional and as a life coach and mentor. You see, my journey started about 30 years ago, and actually a lot longer than that. But 30 years ago, I realized I didn't want what I had. I knew I had a lot of problems in my life, but I just didn't know how I got where I was at. And when I really stopped to look at it, I could see and tell that a lot of the things that happened early in my life impacted the journey throughout until I made a decision to stop. For many of you who suffer or struggle with alcohol or substance abuse or just any problem, I mean, it doesn't have to be alcohol or substance abuse. We actually can medicate or push down our traumas or mask them very well. But what happens? A young lady whose boyfriend cheats on her, what does she take into her next relationship? Trauma. And she brings that with her because it's not dealt with, it's not navigated. Somebody hurt her. And because that's left unhealed or unmended, she goes into her next relationship and she has much of the same actions that repeat themselves. And I'm not saying that's her fault at all. I'm saying it's really a societal problem where we don't stop and really look at the wounds that we carry or that happen in our day to day life. And they just stack up. My mother in law the other day, man, maybe about a month ago, she asked me, she goes, Lance, what is it like working with the people you work with? And I say, everybody actually focuses on the alcohol or the substances, the gambling, the sex, whatever the ism is, but rarely do they really talk about the core and real issue. If we could actually, for 1 minute, imagine that we're sitting in, let's say, the middle of a huge arena with 30,000 people in it, a football stadium, say, and for a brief moment, we could see everybody's mental, emotional, and spiritual wounds that have been inflicted upon them and that they're carrying through their lives. It's not a pleasant sight. And it's at that point that we have to realize healing has to begin for our society to get better. It's not going to get better throwing rocks. It's not going to get better being angry at somebody that isn't really responsible for our actions. See, for me, growing up as a poor, I got to be very guarded in how I communicate my childhood because sometimes folks get upset because I'm a little blunt. I had a rough childhood. I adopted an image and identity that I was a poor little broken kid and that nobody cared or wanted me. I was abandoned and unloved. Some of my earliest memories were sitting at home with my dog in the middle of the bed at the middle of the night, wondering if my mother was ever going to come home. My father was never really present. And that impacted this little shell inside here growing up. And then in school, I was a little weird kid. I was the kid that had ADHD and couldn't sit still. So it was easier for the education system to put me in the classroom, or I mean, in the principal's office, and help me sit on a bench and give me something to do to keep me busy. And I always felt different than other kids. And it was very, very difficult as a child, to say the least. But at some point, I learned how to mask that feeling and those impressions, that identity. And I began to create another identity. I started to cover over what I was feeling because I found that in having money or having things or drugs gave me a sense of identity that I never had when I was a poor, broken little kid. And by the age of 12, I was already in juvenile halls and youth authority, heading towards youth authority. I was rebellious. I wasn't going to school. I had an attitude. Nobody could tell me anything. I didn't think anybody cared, so why would I even listen? And can you hear the impact of that trauma from that little kid seeping into my teenage years? Yes. And this little image became louder and louder and louder throughout the course of my life, to the point where I've been in positions, and maybe you too, where you've had someone that you're in a group of people and they're sitting there talking and you go, this is stupid. I don't want to be a part of this. Why am I even hanging out with these people? This isn't what I want to do with my life. And yet you can't say that because your identity is wrapped up in who they think you are or who you want them to think you are. And you would do anything to keep that. See, validation became a big drug for me. If you give me a pat on the back and said I was great, I'm in. I couldn't look weak. And I couldn't let you see that broken little child inside that I had buried in a closet and I didn't want you to see. I was afraid for people to see how I saw myself. And so I went through my life up until my 30s carrying this trauma from my childhood and turning it out on the world. And I hurt a lot of people in doing that. And when I talk about trauma and healing, most of us don't even know the healing aspect of trauma. I mean, I wrote down the 6 stages of grief, which are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I lived in denial and anger forever. I denied it and I was angry about it and I lived accordingly. And I justified my lifestyle by saying they did that to me so I can do whatever I want. And I can't say I was further from the truth, but I didn't realize that till I was in my early 30s. And I come up against a life situation where there wasn't a real decision to be made. I had to actually stop. It's like going to a hospital and a doctor seeing that I've had a broken leg when I was 12 that healed wrong. What does that doctor have to do? He's going to have to re-break that leg, put another cast on it, and I'm going to have to let that heal for 6 to 8 weeks before I can walk on it again. And even when I learn to walk on it again, it's going to feel awkward. It's going to feel uncomfortable. That's the same way with these wounds of the mind, body, and spirit. When we go into healing work with this stuff, with a therapist, with an elder, with a spiritual guide, whoever your choice of person is, please find somebody. But when you're in it, it's uncomfortable. You're asking me, or I'm asking you to give up something that you've built an identity around. And you've justified your life and all the stuff you've done because of that. It's like we're anchored in time to when we were 5, 10, or 15 years old. And if that isn't crazy, I don't know what is. But most people running around the world today are anchored to 5, 10, and 15-year-old themselves and don't even know it. We probably work next to them. We probably live next to them. We probably have family that are them. We're them. And there comes a point in time where I believe in therapy. It's an hour a week. I believe that at some point, it can't be a warm, cuddly thing. When that doctor had to re-break the leg that's been broken and healed wrong, it's not comfortable. When we talk about the pain that we've had incurred upon us or that we've incurred upon others and caused trauma or received trauma, it's not a gentle conversation. And I have to preface all of this by saying that when someone hurts us, I'm not in any way saying what those people did to us was justified, right, or in any way appropriate. What I am saying is that if we're carrying that 5, 10, 15 years later and using that as a gauge of how we treat the world and perceive the world and ourselves in it, that's wrong. At some point, we have to grow up and say, I don't want to carry that hurt anymore. A lot of people talk about anger, they talk about resentment. It's not about anger and resentment. Those are things that aren't really at the core of the issue. The core of the issue is pain. Why am I angry? Somebody hurt me. Something happened that displeased me in such a way that it hurt me and created this emotion called anger that left unchecked turned into a resentment. And then I basically can stigmatize an entire group of people, a church, a faith, a race. I can get carried away. And I give you an example. When I was young, I was assaulted sexually, and it was by a white group of people, specifically one white guy, tattoos, gangbanger. I'm not even judging white gangbangers. You do your thing if that's what your thing is. I love you all. I want you all to have a better life. That's what it really is about. And I was assaulted by this individual. And for the next 20 years, I wouldn't talk to white folk. I wouldn't have a conversation. I was very judgmental. I was very intolerant to most that fit that genre or that role. And I can remember sitting with my mentor one day and we were talking about this very trauma in my life. And he says, do you want to work on that, Lance? I said, yeah, I'm a big recovery guy at that point. You know, I'm doing my work to heal and want a life that's better. And he goes, I want you to go make 5 friends that are white that have tattoos this week and tell me how that goes. I'm like, are you crazy? No. And he goes, well, tell me how your recovery works and how you want to heal. And then maybe we'll talk about it next week. And I'm really grateful for this man because he pushed me to really challenge the stuff that I had been carrying into today and into that day when he made that comment. And needless to say, I went out that week and spoke to 5, maybe 10, I don't know how many, white people with tattoos. And I realized that the people that I was talking to weren't responsible for the man that hurt me and that they had done nothing wrong. And it was inappropriate for me to continue to go. Hold on a minute. I got some people coming in here. Let me put this up in here. Uh, hey, Timmy. I got a couple things going on here, so chime in when you want, brother. I'm glad to have you here. I don't understand. I don't understand. Hey, how are you? I'm here in California, and tonight I'm talking about trauma and pain and how we carry that and hurt ourselves and hurt other people. I can't. I saw it, but right now I'm doing a podcast and I can't really do a game right now, brother. I appreciate you very much. Okay. I'm gonna get back. I got a podcast going right now, so I'll come back in a while with you. All right, brother. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. I got you, but I got to get back in here. I'm doing a live. Oops. Sorry about that, folks. A guy chimed in that a guy I used to work with, and he has broken English. I was trying to work with him, and it takes a lot of patience and a lot of time, but he's doing well. Um, so back to the trauma. As I was saying before, Richard, my mentor, asked me to make friends with 5 white people with tattoos. And I was very hesitant because I had been victimized by someone from that following. But I followed his direction because I knew I wanted something different. I wanted healing. I wanted to be free. You know that prison within that keeps us trapped? A lot of that prison is the traumas and the pains and the hurts we carry that define how we look at the world and how we look at ourselves. And we deserve better. We truly do. I don't know if anybody's chimed in or we have anybody joining, but I'm going to keep talking for another 15 or so minutes. And this is my first time, so bear with me. Um, hmm. So if there's an area in your life, I guess I'll just keep it simple. If there's an area in your life where you're hurting, where you can stop for a moment and say, you know, this happened in my life and I've really never dealt with it. Painful or not, the level of degree of pain is real, but it's time to heal. How can I truly be free and live my life today if I continue to carry everything from my past into it? I worked with some transformational people once who really talked about how we think and how we perceive the world. And it was a very brutal training. Uh, One of my coaches, Eileen, would talk about up until now. And it was like most of the narratives that I had in my head were based on historical issues in my life. Like, this has always happened. It's always been that way. That happened. I've tried this 1,000 times and it never worked. My mom was this way. It was this way in high school. I would have this whole library I would pull out to really define a situation that I'm presently dealing with. And every time I did that, she'd step up in my face almost and go, up until now. And she would intervene in that thought. She would make me stop and see where I was going. I wasn't being present. I was being 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago and bringing that into this moment to justify doing nothing, but being stuck and not seeing opportunity in the situation that was in front of me. And maybe you do that. Maybe many of us do that. I still catch myself sometimes doing that in group, where I catch a client that's doing that and I intervene in their thinking and I say, where did that come from? Where were you right now? And they giggle or they laugh and they go, wow, I never thought about that. Because we're so automatic pilot with the way we think that a lot of our belief systems and a lot of the stuff that we've stored in here, we just bring to the table and we don't even think about it. Or I'm talking to you and I've already set a narrative of what you're thinking or what I think you're thinking, and I'm already thinking about the answer to what you're thinking or what you're going to say. So when you say it, I'm not even listening to you. I'm responding to the narrative I've already created, or I'm judging you perceived on the narrative I've already created, which is inappropriate. And one of the gifts, both of that training that I got with that group of people and my mentor, is I was taught to just stop and listen. Suspend this for a moment, look and listen and shut my mouth and just take in what you're saying. An amazing thing happened. My memory improved. I can recall things in conversations with people many, many years ago, actually, that we've had conversations about. And it shows a dedication and an authenticity to the person that I'm listening to, that I care. And so I guess with all of that said, and this being my first live on the studio here at YouTube, I just want to appreciate anybody that's chimed in or saw this or looked at it. Let me go check something real quick. Okay, nothing happening yet, but I want to invite you or anybody that sees this to come on board. I'm probably going to cut this down. It's a little long to last. Peace.